in the Bible, and we have been looking at now the global flood explains the sorting of the, why can I not think of the word? What do we call them? Fossils. Thank you, somebody. All right, the global flood explains why bottom dwelling sea creatures that lived near the shore are often found at the lower levels of the fossil strata, as these would usually have been buried first. That makes sense, right? The flood waters did not reach maximum height for 150 days. Right. Land animals and birds would have been killed after the sea creatures that lived in the shallow areas near land. Which also, if there's a flood, what are you going to do if there's a flood that's like threatening your life? What would you do? Go to higher ground, right? I'm going to seek the highest ground, right? So, all right. But a global flood explains the mixing of the fossils. The global flood explains why land animals and sea animals are oftentimes jumbled together in the fossil beds. The global flood explains sea creatures on mountains. That's interesting. In Peru and other places, whale fossils have been found high in mountains far from the ocean. That's interesting, isn't it? How did that get there? Let me just back up to this. When we think about this, how have these fossils been found in mountains far from the ocean? The only thing that explains that is a global flood. That's the only explanation that fits with that. It says, I own a beautiful trilobite fossil from the Atlas Mountains of Morocco. The trilobite was a sea creature. He also owns ammonite fossils, which are found in Nepal in the high Himalayas. Okay, the ammonite was a sea creature of the order of squid. And just so you have an idea, there's the fossil of it. Evolutionists say that the land was lifted up over a long period of time to form the mountains with the sea fossils on them. So they say it happened over a long period of time. The Himalayas were formed, this is from NASA Earth Observatory website. It says the Himalayas were formed when a large landmass broke off from Africa. When this landmass came close to Asia, it started to push up the land ahead of it, forming a large shallow ocean with rich ocean life. The bones and shells of the plants and animals in this shallow ocean formed limestone and left fossils. This is not possible. If the creatures had died in a sea before the land lifted up, they would not have fossilized. Such fossilization doesn't happen over a long period of time. Remember, it happens very quickly, very catastrophically when something is instantly buried. That's how fossils happen. Evolutionists also theorize, okay, this is just their theory, it's not fact, that some fossils were made by layers of volcanic ash. All right, this is grasping at straws right here, okay? Just anything to fit our narrative is what we're going to go for, okay? So they theorize that some fossils were made by layers of volcanic ash, but volcanic ash does not make fossils. We have a living laboratory in Mount St. Helens, one of the most powerful volcanic eruptions of recent times. In 1980, it poured out countless tons of ash. The ash plume was 15 miles high. The ash covered a large part of the western United States. So where it's red, it was 2 to 5 inches. The orange is a ½ inch to 2 inches. And the yellow is traced to ½ an inch. How it got this spot over here, I have no idea, in Oklahoma. But that's pretty crazy that it came that far. I had heard reports also that some of the ash came into New Mexico. That's a huge amount of ash. All right, so there's a bunch of ash. This is ash billowing across the sky many miles from the volcano. The ash lay thick on the ground and had to be cleaned up with bulldozers. So there's a backhoe right there piling up ash out of the road. This ash-covered truck was 12 miles from the mountain. A man blowing ash off his car. The ash killed some people and many animals, but it did not produce fossils. So we have living proof. We have a science experiment in front of us that disproves exactly what they're trying to say happened. Okay, so we have the facts and then we have their theory. So when we look at the facts, they disprove the theory. The rock layers in which fossils are found are sedimentary rather than igneous, which refers to rock made by volcanic lava. This means the rock was laid down by water. The best explanation for the sedimentary rock layers and the massive fossil beds is the global flood described in the Bible. Okay, water laying it down. Recent books by men with PhDs in geology and engineering show evidence for the creationist view of the fossil record. Earth's Catastrophic Past by Andrew Snelling. The Geology book by John Morris. In the Beginning by Walt Brown. So the summary of the fossil record's witness against evolution. Far from providing evidence for the evolution of life, the fossil record disproves evolution. So let me back up to these. So if you want to dive into this more, here's 3 resources. You can do that. I'll share it with us another one that kind of answers some questions. This is by Ken Ham. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Again, if I recommend any book from here, anything written by a man, it does not mean that I agree with everything that they espouse, okay? I don't even agree with myself sometimes. If you look at the notes in my own Bible, I've had to cross some of them out, okay? Because I realize, oh, wait, I'm wrong. So just because I recommend something doesn't mean I wholeheartedly endorse everything that they do, okay? If you've been here for a time, you know my doctrinal position on things, okay? So I do recommend this book, The Answers book by Ken Ham. The Ark is it in Kentucky, right? It's in Kentucky. The Ark and then the Creation Museum. I haven't been to them. Everyone I know that's gone to them says wholeheartedly, you need to go. You need to go visit them. He's the one that put that together. I hear it's amazing. But here's a book I recommend, the New Answers book. There's also a New Answers book too, but this answers a bunch of questions. So this would be something I recommend. I'll be reading something out of this here probably this morning if I get to it. And then these ones as well. These will be deep dives into geology, creation, and the flood. So if you want more, dig into these. If you get into the creation, evolution debate and you start studying more into this, these names will be familiar with you. Like Walt Brown's pretty quoted. Andrew Snelling, I don't know that I've necessarily heard this guy before, but I'm sure he's there too if you jump into it. So here's the summary of the fossil record's witness against evolution. Far from providing evidence for the evolution of life, the fossil record disproves evolution. Okay, the fossil record does not contain the countless transitional creatures that evolution requires. Remember, we started this study last week as well, so there's more information. Okay, so it does not contain all the transitional creatures that evolution says should be there, that Darwin himself said should be there. The fossil record shows creatures appearing suddenly, fully formed. Okay, that's a creator. Okay, they don't evolve into anything. They're just what they are today. We looked at that bat that was, however many thousand years old. It's basically the same thing they are today, right? We looked at those. Okay, the fossil record demonstrates complexity from its earliest layers. So it wasn't simple life forms that slowly evolved into more complex. No, there's complexity from the very beginning. And then the fossil record also exhibits stability of species rather than change. So there's stability. There's not the change that they suggest, that their theory suggests happens. The fossil record exhibits the stability rather than change. Okay, let me exit out of here and pull up the next one. Okay. All right, so here's what we've gone through so far as we look at evolution and science, the history of evolution, Darwin skeptics today, natural selection, mutations, vestigial organs, peppered moth, embryo development, ape men, the fossil record, and now we are on billions of years, and we will continue through. All right, billions of years. Sorry, it's going to do that. I was trying to figure out why it keeps doing that. Couldn't do it, so I'll just have to back up when it does that. The idea that the universe is billions of years old is probably the major evolutionary myth that is used to contradict the Bible. Is it not? Is that not what they use to contradict the Bible? That it's millions of years old, and anybody, with any basic understanding of the English language and reading, when you read Genesis, the first few chapters, Genesis 1 really is all you need to read. You recognize that, okay, God made everything in how many days? 6, right? That's a trick question, right? Everyone says 7, right? No, he rested the 7th. He made it on the 6th. All right. So now don't say 7. No, you'd be wrong. Okay, 6. Okay, but he made everything in 6 days, rested on the 7th, right? But really, in a quick time period, everything was made, right? And just from a cursory reading, you'll get that. There's no way you read millions of years into that. No one's going to read millions of years into that if you just take it for what it says. Okay, so when science now is saying that, hey, the universe and the earth is billions of years old, it's like immediately like, okay, one of them's true and one of them's not, right? I mean, that's what it tells me. One is right and one is wrong, okay, if that's the case. Okay, so this is what they use to contradict the Bible and honestly, if billions of years old is right and evolution is right, then all of this is wrong. Honestly, we cannot trust any of this. Okay, I wouldn't trust any of this. Okay, this is why the first 11 chapters of Genesis are foundational. Okay, the Bible says, if the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? And I keep bringing this up because it's so important. So if the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? Well, the foundation to really all of the Bible is found in those first 11 chapters. I mean, that lays out Genesis chapter 3, we have laid out already a Savior's coming. Okay, so if this is wrong, if the very beginning's wrong, then we can throw it all away. By the way, another supporting argument for creation is Jesus when he showed up. He authenticated the flood, Jonah in the whale. He authenticated these things. He mentioned them. And that's pretty strong evidence to me, since he's, prophesied his death and resurrection, and then he resurrected. Okay? So, if evolution is right, in my opinion, we're wasting our time. I don't believe that, because here I am, right? So, I believe evolution is wrong. And these are, some of the reasons why. Before Darwin published On the Origin of Species in 1859, doubt in the Bible was being spread by Charles Lyell's uniformitarian geology and the claim that the earth is millions of years old. So it went in the 1850s, 1860s, millions of years old, to now they're claiming billions of years old, okay? So this is the science, okay, that is used. Okay, Lyell taught that the earth's rock layers were laid down gradually over millions of years rather than in a global flood. Okay, this is his theory. The revolution from young earth to old earth was the snowball starting the whole avalanche that eventually changed mankind's entire worldview. Ian Taylor. He's another one in the creation evolution debate, that name. Lyell was as much a Bible hater as he was a geologist. His objective was to destroy the authority of the Genesis record. Lyell hoped to use his theory to drive men out of the Mosaic record, life letters and journals. The theory of evolution requires long periods of time for creatures to change, okay? Radiometric dating was invented in the 20th century and was alleged to provide absolute results, okay? Radiometric dating. W.F. Libby received a Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1960 for his discovery of carbon-14 dating. This, you got to like science. You got to have a mind for it. It can get confusing as you read it. I've had to read through several times to grasp exactly what it's saying as it talks about carbon-14 dating and half-lives and all of that. It's just, if you enjoy it, it's probably interesting. I don't, so I'm like reading through it and I'm like, trying to get through it. But the information's there. We'll read some of it here in just a bit. Radiometric dating is based on the principle that the unstable isotope of an atomic element decays at a set rate to form a stable element. The original isotope is called a parent and the ending one is called a daughter. Okay, so basically the unstable isotope of an atomic element decays at a set rate. So that's it. They're looking at that set rate of decay, okay? An isotope is the form of an element such as carbon and oxygen that has a different number of neutrons. Each chemical element consists of atoms that are made up of 3 parts: protons, neutrons, and electrons. Carbon, one of the most common elements in the universe, has 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons. But carbon-14 has 8 neutrons and is therefore an isotope. With too many neutrons, carbon-14 is unstable, so it decays or adjusts to become stable, turning into carbon-12 by losing its 2 extra neutrons. The rate of decay can be measured. Unstable isotopes are radioactive, meaning they eject neutrons and protons. This process can be measured by a Geiger counter. The adjusting process is called radioactive decay. A measurable amount of carbon-14 is in the Earth's atmosphere. Plants take it in to produce energy through photosynthesis. Animals take in carbon-14 by eating plants or other plant-eating animals. When plants and animals are alive, the carbon-14 to carbon-12 ration is steady at 1 part per trillion. When plants and animals die, they stop taking in the carbon-14, and the amount of carbon-14 begins to decrease through the process of decay, a process that scientists can measure. Everyone following along so far, right? I'll show us some stuff here in a bit. Carbon-14 can therefore be used to date things that were once composed of living plant or animal matter, such as coal. Okay, because they had that living plant or animal matter, which had the carbon-14. Once they die, it starts decaying and it starts becoming less and less, so it can, what do they call it, become neutral and balance itself out. Okay, so it's going through that process. Carbon-14 has a half-life of 5,730 years, meaning that in that time, in 5,730 years, half of it will convert to carbon-12. Okay, after 2,865 years, half of the remainder will be converted, and after 1,432 years, half of the remainder will be converted, etc., all the way through. In 100,000 years or less, there it is, in 100,000 years or less, there should be no carbon-14 left because the rate of decay. Okay, so if something has carbon-14 in it, the oldest it could be is how old? 100,000 years, right? At the max, the oldest it can be is 100,000 years old, right? Because after that, it's all going to balance out, right? It's looking to become balanced. So all the carbon-14 will be out and it'll just be carbon-12, right? So if there's any left after 100,000 years, it would be gone. Okay, since most rocks don't contain carbon, geologists use other isotopes to date rocks. Uranium-238 decays to lead. Uranium-235 to lead-207, potassium-40 to argon, rubidium to strontium, samarium to neodymium. Thought we were going to be in chemistry class, right? These isotopes are found in igneous rocks, which refers to rock made of the cooling of magma in the earth or lava on the earth. So, okay. So billions of years. Every evolutionary dating method is built on evolutionary assumptions. Evolutionary dating has been refuted by carbon-14 testing. Evolutionary dating methods give widely different results, okay? And just number one, it's built on assumptions, evolutionary assumptions, okay? And evolution, the dating's been refuted by this testing, and the methods give widely different results. We'll look at some of these examples. Evolutionists are selective in choosing dates. Most dating methods point to a young Earth. Biomaterials and ancient fossils point to a young Earth. Okay, so even with this carbon-14 dating, the oldest the Earth could be is 100,000 years old, right? That's the oldest it could be if there's carbon-14 in these things that they suppose are, hundreds of millions of years old. One, every evolutionary dating method is built upon evolutionary assumptions. A fundamental fact about radiometric dating methods that makes them undependable is that they are built on unproven evolutionary assumptions. Three major assumptions as listed by Andrew Snelling, who has a PhD in physics. He said, one, the original number of unstable atoms can be known. So this is the assumption, okay, is that the original number of unstable atoms can be known. Scientists assume how many unstable or parent atoms existed at the beginning based on how many parents and daughter atoms are left today. The second assumption, the rate of change was constant. Scientists assume that radioactive atoms have changed at the same rate throughout time. Again, this is the idea of uniformitarianism, right? Everything's always been the same way, nothing's ever been different. Okay, scientists assume that these atoms have changed the same rate throughout time, ignoring the impact of creation or changes during Noah's flood. Three, the third assumption, the daughter atoms were all produced by radioactive decay. Scientists assume that no outside forces such as flowing groundwater contaminated the sample. Okay, I mean, is that a possibility if it has sat there for millions of years? Or even 100 years? That's possible, right? I mean, it rains still, doesn't it? Okay. Scientists try to remove variables as best they can, but it's impossible for them to know conditions that existed in the distant past. The assumptions remain unproven, so the science remains uncertain. They assume that there was no six-day creation a few thousand years ago and that there was no global flood. Thus, they make no attempt to understand how these events might have affected atomic elements and their decay. All right, because so what is this pointing at? Why do they make no attempt to understand how these might have affected it? It's because they come at it with a preconceived idea, right? They come at it with a worldview. Okay, and everyone has a worldview. All right, my worldview is a creationist worldview. Okay, they have an evolutionist worldview. What we should try and do is step back from what we think it is and just look objectively at what evidence is in front of us and see where that leads us. That's what we should strive for, all of us. They say that their dating methods prove there was no recent creation, but they base their methods on the assumption that there was no recent creation and tune their dating systems accordingly. This is circular reasoning that proves nothing. The burning candle. This is an example from The World That Perished by John Whitcomb. This example uses two assumptions. One, the assumption of the starting point or original condition, and two, the assumption of a uniform rate of change from that starting point to the present. Consider a burning candle in an abandoned house. It is now burning at the rate of 1 inch an hour. Question: how long has it been burning, and thus, how long ago was the house abandoned? Answer: no one can know until it can be shown how high the candle was when it was lit and whether the rate of burn has been constant. You can't know unless you know those variables, right? You can't know. How old is the earth? Answer: no one can know unless it can be proven what it was like when it began and how rapidly it has changed since then. The hourglass example, that's from this book right here, the New Answers book. So the following example shows how that radiometric dating relies on basic, unprovable assumptions. If we walk into a room and observe an hourglass with sand flowing from top to bottom, we could calculate how long ago the hourglass was turned over. We would need to estimate how fast the sand is falling and then measure the amount of sand at the bottom. But we could still be wrong because this formula is based on certain assumptions that might be incorrect. It assumes, one, that there was no sand at the bottom when the hourglass was first turned over, which we can never know. Two, no sand has been added or taken out. We can't know. And three, the sand has been falling at the same rate. We can't know. Let me ask, anybody as a kid, you ever found an hourglass, played with an hourglass, you turned them over? Have you ever turned it over and it got stuck? Right? And then like you're watching it and it's stuck and then it'll just start? See, how do we know that didn't happen? See, these are the assumptions that you assume. Yes, if everything works out perfect, you could figure that stuff out, right? If you know all of these variables, but we don't. Likewise, the evolutionist assumes that he knows the conditions that existed at the formation of rocks he is testing. He assumes a uniformitarian process since then and other things he does not know, but that are necessary for accurate dating results. Evolutionary dating has been refuted by carbon-14 testing. The carbon-14 dating system actually disproves evolution's millions of years doctrine. This was proven by the RATE project, stands for radioisotopes and the age of the Earth. This project was conducted by a team of 8 PhD scientists between 1997 and 2005. The scientists tested various radiometric dating systems. The project is summarized in 2 volumes, Radioisotopes and the Age of the Earth. I'm sure that is a lot of fun to read, but I have not read it, okay? The results of the carbon-14 dating demonstrated serious problems for long geologic ages. Samples were taken from 10 different coal layers that, according to evolutionists, represent different time periods in the geologic column. Okay, so this is what evolutionists say. They represent 10 different time periods within, remember that geologic column that we've seen pictures of petrified trees going through? Okay, how'd that happen, right? Let's just put that aside. They say it's 10 different time periods within this geologic column. The coal samples, which date to hundreds of millions of years based on standard evolution time estimates, all contained, get this, measurable amounts of carbon-14. So, according to evolution, they date to hundreds of millions of years based on their time estimates. But every single one of them contained measurable amounts of carbon-14. So what does that mean? Well, the next sentence tells us, right? Since the half-life of carbon-14 is 5,730 years, there should be no detectable carbon-14 left after about 100,000 years. So this is legit science, that carbon-14 dating, right? We know the half-life of carbon-14, it's 5,730 years. So if these are, hundreds of millions of years, there should be absolutely no chance that there's any carbon-14 left in those rock layers. But what do they find? They find measurable amounts. So the oldest they could be is 100,000 years old. This has been confirmed by the best carbon-14 dating laboratories. Dr. Andrew Snelling says, the best laboratories in the world using the best equipment under the cleanest conditions over the last 3 decades have been routinely finding measurable radiocarbon in coal, oil, natural gas, limestone, fossil bones, fossil shells, and even diamonds. If these were all millions of years old, then there should be no radiocarbon left in them. The fact is that all these materials yield radiocarbon dates of only thousands of years. All of this is documented in scientific literature, such as in the journal Radiocarbon. So there's a great amount of evidence that the Bible is right after all about the Earth's age. All right, let me pull some stuff from this I wanted to read to us just real quickly. Okay, remember that first assumption that's made in radiometric dating, the initial conditions of the rock samples are accurately known, right? So that's an assumption, is that they knew what they were going through. Okay, so as we look at this, sure. Okay. So it says, we know that radioisotope dating does not always work because we can test it on rocks of known age. In 1997, a team of 8 research scientists known as the RATE Group, Radioisotopes and the Age of the Earth, set out to investigate the assumptions commonly made in standard radioisotope dating practices, also referred to as single sample radioisotope dating. Their findings were significant and directly impact the evolutionary dates of millions of years. Steve Austin, PhD in geology and member of the RATE team, had a rock from the newly formed 1986 lava dome from Mount St. Helens dated. Using potassium argon dating, the newly formed rocks gave ages between 0.5 and 2.8 million years. These dates show that significant argon, the daughter element, was present when the rock solidified, so that tells us assumption 1 is false. Okay, so we know how old they are, yet it's testing at 0.5 to 2.8 million years old. Mount Ngauruhoe is located in the North Island of New Zealand and is one of the country's most active volcanoes. Even samples were taken from solidified lava and dated. These rocks are known to have formed from eruptions in 1949, 1954, and 1975. The rock samples were sent to a respected commercial laboratory, Geocon Laboratories in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The ages of the rocks range from 0.27 to 3.5 million years old. Because these rocks are known to be less than 70 years old, it is apparent that assumption number 1 is again false. All right, what is assumption number 1? The initial conditions of the rock samples are accurately known. They don't know them, right? When radioisotope dating fails to give accurate dates on rocks of known age, why should we trust it for rocks of unknown age? In each case, the ages of the rocks were greatly inflated. Isochron dating. There's another form of dating called isochron dating, which involves analyzing 4 or more samples from the same rock unit. This form of dating attempts to eliminate one of the assumptions in single sample radioisotope dating by using ratios and graphs rather than counting atoms present. It does not depend on the initial concentration of the daughter element being 0. The isochron dating technique is thought to be infallible because it supposedly eliminates the assumptions about starting conditions. However, this method has different assumptions about starting conditions and can give incorrect dates. If single sample and isochron dating methods are objective and reliable, they should agree. However, they frequently do not. So if both these 2 different methods are accurate, they should come out the same dates, right? Okay, but they do not. When a rock is dated by more than one method, it may yield very different ages. For example, the RATE group obtained radioisotope dates from 10 different locations. To omit any potential bias, the rock samples were analyzed by several commercial laboratories. In each case, the isochron dates differed substantially from the single sample radioisotope dates. In some cases, the range was more than 500 million years. That's a big mistake, don't you think? 500 million years. 2 conclusions drawn by the RATE group include: 1, the single sample potassium argon dates showed a wide variation, and 2, a marked variation in ages was found in the isochron method using different parent-daughter analysis. If different methods yield different ages and there are variations with the same method, how can scientists know for sure the age of any rock or the age of the Earth? In one specific case, Dr. Steve Austin of the RATE group took samples from the Cardenas basalt, which is among the oldest strata in the eastern Grand Canyon. Next, samples from the western canyon basalt lava flows, or basalt lava flows, which are among the youngest formation in the canyon, were analyzed. So using isochron dating methods, an age of 1.07 billion years was assigned to the oldest rocks. Okay, 1.07 billion years, the oldest rocks, that's how old they are. And a date of 1.34 billion years to the youngest lava flows. The youngest rocks gave an age. So, we put these numbers out like 1.07 billion and 1.34 billion. That's not that much, right? It's just, whatever, like a quarter, like 0.25, right, of a difference. Okay, but here's let's put it in perspective. The youngest rocks gave an age 270 million years older. Okay, when you read it like that, it sounds like a lot more than just 1.07 and 1.34. 270 million years older than the oldest rocks. Are the dates given in textbooks and journals accurate and objective? When assumptions are taken into consideration and discordant, wide range or unacceptable dates are not omitted, radioisotope dating often gives inconsistent and inflated ages. But they push this off as this is the science that we're building this theory of evolution on. And by the way, as we've studied evolution and we've looked at it, we've seen consistently throughout really the modern history of Darwinian evolution how they've lied to us all the way through. And they withhold things. They even add things. They bring things in. They pull up fake studies and fake drawings and everything else to indoctrinate people to follow evolution when the actual facts disprove that. Like, even if there is different, you have these two different methods and they come up with two different date ranges or of how old they are, of the age of whatever these rock layers are, they should at least be honest enough to say, here's the actual information you're getting. Here's how inaccurate it can be. But if they did that, then people would not believe evolution. If you heard this in school all the way growing up, you are not going to believe in evolution. You'd be wondering, why are we being taught this? When like every time you teach us something, then you go back and you say, but here's where it's wrong, right? Because that's essentially what you're doing. That's what they should be doing. So we have to ask ourselves, why is this being taught? Why is this pushed so hard? Why is this in front of us, even outside of school? Why is this what the world accepts? I mean, just watch a documentary on Discovery Channel or the History Channel, anything like that, and they're going to tell you everything's, billions of years old. 100 million years ago, 200 million years ago this happened. Where are they getting that from? From bad information, from bad science. That's where they're getting it from. All right, next week we'll pick up with this. Evolutionary dating methods give widely different results. We've seen some of that. I kind of jumped ahead. So next week we will look at that.